okay?
Okay.
Birth anniversary. Can you do that? Do we have any anniversaries up here?
Oh, no, it's birthday.
Oh, it's just a birthday. Okay. Oh, she wanted to do birth anniversary. Well, you know what? There could be somebody online right now, so you can say birth anniversary if you want to. Ready? Go ahead.
Happy birth anniversary to you. Happy birth anniversary to you. Happy birth anniversary. God bless you. Happy birth anniversary to you. And more.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. That was great. We have many talented people in here. They know the birth anniversary song. I hope our streamers got to see that. I hope y'all got to see the Katrina and the Bentleys +1. Okay, let's see. Let me get my order of dismissal here so that we'll know who's going first. Oh, you didn't send it? Okay, so we're doing it the same. We're doing 3-year-olds first and then all of Quiver? Okay, I'll just follow last week's order then. Yay, they did. We're live, they're telling me. So y'all got to see it. Wasn't that adorable? I love it. Okay, so let's go to release our 3-year-old treasures with Miss Karen and Miss Summer. There's Miss Summer waiting at the door for you, 3-year-olds. And parents, just a reminder, if it's your first time taking your child to one of these classes, or if it's their first time attending one of these classes that we're dismissing, that goes for all the classes we're dismissing, please go with them to give the teachers a little bit of information. They won't keep you long at all, and you'll be right back in here, but they do need you to do that, give them some information, just contact and such, for your children's safety. Okay, 3-year-olds, yay. Looks like you're gonna have a good class today, Miss Summer. Okay. Next, we have all Quiver ages 10 through 18 through this main door. Now, please walk and watch out for the younger ones over there. And I see some banners there. Love it. See, is that Mr. Hood over there holding a banner? And we fill the vacuum as they've left. Next, we have ages 8 and 9 treasures with, it says Miss Candace, but y'all don't look like Miss Candace today. Miss Donna and Miss Tracy. Yay, y'all seem to be really popular. Okay, and then ages 6 and 7 with Miss Nayla. And they still keep humming. We have a lot of 6 and 7-year-olds. You also have a big class today, Miss Nayla. Y'all have fun. And last but not least, it looks like with Miss Katie, we have our 4 and 5-year-old treasures. 4 and 5-year-old treasures. I wish y'all could see all the cuteness that I get to see up here. He He has already had his coffee, obviously. He goes, thank you. And so now for those of us that are left, we're going to stand up and do jumping jacks and a few calisthenics. No, I'm teasing. I need to do that because of all I ate for lunch. So are you ready, Mr. Cloud?
Yeah, I couldn't get anybody else to do this for me. Well, you want to come and field all the questions? All right. The enforcer. Beth is the enforcer. No, more than the potato chips. I've been with you 40 years. I know how this goes. It has been 40 years, hasn't it? Whew. Wow. Time does something, that's for sure. All right. Well, I'm missing my other microphone. No, I'm not. Here it is. It's here. It's hiding. Is it what? Is it special? Yeah, it says David right on it. Come here, get it. Yeah. Yeah, you shouldn't have, but you did. You did. So do you know what I need you to do, sir? Okay. So I need you to either find Stephen Lane or John Holsty. I don't see John Holsty. Yes. There he is, back there, to get us started out. Because I know you have something you want to share with us today, John. Don't give me the, I don't know.
All right, well, you asked for it.
True, I did. That's true.
I think I found some clarity on something that's been bothering me for years.
Okay.
And you see what you think. It's in chapter 22. It's verses 16 and 17. And when a man entices a maiden who is not engaged and lies with her, he shall certainly pay the bride price for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he pays according to the bride price of maidens. Now that clause there, that if he absolutely refuses to give her to him, seems to wildly conflict with Deuteronomy. It's passage in Deuteronomy 22:28 and 29. It says, if a man finds a damsel that's a virgin, which is not betrothed, to hold her and lay with her, and they be found, then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he's humbled her, and he may not put her away all his days. That seems to be completely at odds. In Deuteronomy, it says he has to be her wife, and in Exodus, it seems to say that the father has veto power, and there's no have to about it. And you cleared it up for me this morning. And I'm not sure what terms you put this in, but basically Mishpatim is it's a hard issue to do this, to follow this. Always has been. And Exodus, the first chapter, or first commandment, I am Yahweh your God. That kind of sets the tone. If he is your God, and you're going to follow him, and then you read 21:6. Then his master shall bring him before Elohim. That's actually what it says. And if his master is bringing this Ebed before Elohim, that would imply that he's a godly man, that he could be bringing him before the judges, and it's been interpreted that way a lot of times, but it could be he's asking God, what do we do here? And that seems to set the tone, I think. And if we're going to follow that line of logic, well, what about the father who refuses to give the bride? Now, I started thinking about this in prophetic terms. If we are the bride of Messiah, and we have either willingly or unwillingly lain with the enemy and been intimate with the enemy, our Father, who is the head of our house, has the ability to negate that, to refuse to give us over to that. And it's because he's just, and it's because he's loving. And if we look at it in that respect, then it makes complete sense and everything harmonizes. This all predicates on the Father being loving and just and wanting the best for his daughter. then the shall business, it doesn't even come into play. He knows best and he's going to do best. And it kind of reminds me of a quote, and I'm sure you know this one. This is from, I had to look it up, from John Adams. Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. You know, these guys might have been some deists, but they knew what Deuteronomy said. And a lot of the Constitution comes from there. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think it might, because that's what your message was about. So appreciate it.
Just glad I could clear that up for you, John. No, actually, that's great. I mean, it's great insight, but makes perfect sense to me. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. All righty. Anybody have anything from online? Anybody else have questions, comments, observations? We're going to play this game again. There we go. All right.
Of course, I always have something to say.
But you know what? What you have to say is always very beneficial for the congregation to hear. So.
You know, you spoke on Abba constantly reminding us that he delivered us out of the house of bondage. And it just, to me, when he starts out with how to treat a bondservant, he's reminding us of the treatment that we received in Egypt. That they were abused, they were beaten, they were mistreated. And he tells us constantly, repeatedly, he says, when I killed the firstborn of Egypt, I set you apart to myself. So he made a distinction between Egypt and his people. And that's what he's doing here. He's telling us again to make a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Like the way we treat our servants isn't like we learned in Egypt. And that was the very first thing he chose to tell them is like, don't treat your servants the way that you were treated in Egypt. You're to treat them better than that. You're to treat them with compassion. Even verse 18 and 19. It talks about if two men strive together and it comes to blows, that you don't just make sure that the person's okay. You take care of them till they're completely healed. Like you go through, you're there with them and make sure that they're taken care of, that their wages are taken care of. You don't just, so that goes to tell me that even in friendships or in relationships with your brothers, like if it comes to having, strife with a brother, you see it through. You don't just let it come to blows and then let that person go and lick their wounds on their own. You're supposed to be there and help take care of them and see them through that and make sure that those relationships are, there's a different bond there when you make sure that the person heals after it comes to those things. And that just reminds me, because you were talking about, the two greatest commandments are to love Elohim and love your neighbor. Well, that reminded me of 1 John 4:20. It's a quick one. 1 John 4:20, and it says, if someone says, I love Elohim, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For the one not loving his brother whom he has seen, how is he able to love Elohim who is not seen? So there's no separation in loving your neighbor as yourself and loving Elohim. They go hand in hand. If you say you love Elohim but you don't love your neighbor, then you don't really truly love Elohim. So that was my observation on that. And then something else that I noticed that I hadn't noticed before. I think, it's verse 17. And he who curses his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death. Okay, well, there's different words in Scripture for curse. And this isn't the same because, sometimes the word curse means to pronounce evil over a person. But that's not what this word means here. It actually, the definition, Brown Drivers Briggs says to be slight, to be swift, trifling, to be of little account or be light with. So the definition for trifling is unimportant or trivial. So it is literally telling us don't treat your parents trivially, like they're unimportant. It doesn't mean to curse them, like to speak evil over them, but it means to treat them like they have no value. So I thought that was really interesting, that it's telling you,
I think that'll preach.
you should be put to death if you're treating your parents like they have no value, because they're your elders. They're the people that brought you into this world, and
They can take you out. I mean, no, I'm sorry.
exactly. So the lesson in that is don't be trifling with your parents.
Thank you, sir. I want to just make a couple of comments, if I may, on what you said, and just kind of working backwards. As far as the issue with the parents, it seems to me that if someone finds it easy to, disregard, have no respect, and consider your parents, which are your immediate authority, in this world, at least until you become of age and go out on your own, if you can regard them in that way or in that light, it becomes easier to regard the Father in heaven the same way. I think that's why a lot of, I shouldn't say younger people at this point, because they're older now too, but a lot of people have no fear of anything, civil authority, political authority, what have you, and therefore it has taught them or trained them to have no authority or no regard for God's authority. They have no fear of those things. So, which in my mind connects to the whole idea of what you were talking about. If you don't love God, you don't love your neighbor. I have for a long time said, I will continue to say, the hardest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself, because that's one that it'll become evident really quick whether you do or not. And if you can't do that, you really don't love God the way you say you do. So I totally agree with that, which is why the Messiah said those are the two that everything else hangs on. But what was the other thing you mentioned? There was something you said that, boy, it jogged a thought. Do you remember what you said? I know. And I'm asking you, do you remember any of it? Because I've obviously, what I wanted to say has left me for the moment. Oh, come on, man. You're younger than me. You should remember what you just said. Yeah, before that. Oh, yeah, about, the whole part about, you get into an altercation with your neighbor. You don't just walk away and leave them to lick their wounds. That is our inclination. That's how the typical person would handle the situation. You come to blows, you go to your corners, and everybody takes care of themselves. But that, he calls us to a higher standard. If it comes to that, it's all about restitution and restoration. If you inflict harm on someone, if you are a godly person, because John just quoted John Adams, but the principle applies to the Torah, because it's written for a people who are striving to be holy, not for a people who have no regard for these things. And so if you're striving to be holy, even as he is holy, even he has to strike us from time, because there's conflict. Now, he's just, and so it's always legitimate, but he doesn't just leave us that way. He will strike us, so to speak. Where is it? In Hosea chapter 6, come and let us return to the Lord, for he is stricken, but he will heal us. He's going to bind us up after 2 days. So he has stricken us, but he's going to be the one who heals us. He's going to be one who binds us up. He's going to be the one who restores us. So he's not asking us to do something that he hasn't already done. So that goes against our nature, but it speaks to the heart of our God in that he understands and acknowledges that there is going to be conflict, because we're people, we're human. But if there is, here's how it should be resolved. You should help your brother, make restitution when it's necessary, to help him so that there can be restoration and reconciliation. So I think that was a fantastic point to bring out. When Beth and I were youth pastors, and some of the ladies may not appreciate what I'm about to say, I could always handle it better when guys got into a thing. Because guys would be out on the basketball court, they'd get mad at one another, they'd punch one another in the nose, and then they'd shake hands and go back to playing basketball. Girls, no. And it went on for weeks and months, You You know I'm telling the truth, ladies. So, well, what is the spiritual lesson here? I have no idea. It's just, all right, thank you, bro. Appreciate it, man. There was something else you said, though. It's still bugging me. When you think of it, remind me. Where's the microphone? Can you pass it back over real quick? I'm sorry. He and I are not finished talking. Doing a good job there, Mr. Graham. I appreciate you volunteering.
I think that whole restitution and taking care of your neighbor, that helps to resolve bitterness. Because, in Corinthians, when it tells us what love is, it says that love takes no record of evils. So, when someone does something to you, it's real easy to remember that and hold it against them. And if we're not supposed to be taking record of that, we're supposed to forgive 70 times 7, then it helps to show that compassion to the person and heal that bond, because then it prevents that, like you were talking about, that outstanding bitterness between people. If we walk in that and we strive to heal those relationships, and it says, to be at peace with all men, if we strive for that, then it helps to prevent those things from happening to us. Because I know in my past that I've felt resentment towards people for things they've said or done to me, and it doesn't do anything to them. They can go on living their life and be completely happy and satisfied. All it does is make you bitter. It has no effect on them. If you allow something that somebody else does to you to have that much control of your life, then you're not in control of yourself. Like, it's up to you. Like, I always tell people that perception is 70% of your life. No matter bad or good that happens to you, it's what you decide to do with it is going to be the outcome of it. You can use everything in your life to better yourself or worsen yourself, and it's up to you to make that choice.
Amen. I really appreciate what you share, brother. I really do. We'll come back over to you, Mr. Green. I'm going to read from the screen here. Someone asked about Hagar today. That must have been in the chat, because I don't remember that today. Someone asked about Hagar today. Does the judgment on the bondservant extend to slaves from other lands? Also, Eleazar, would he be called a bondservant? If you're speaking of Eleazar, the man from Damascus who served Abraham, it seems to me, functionally, that's what he did. He did what his master asked him to do, and he was very committed to that. So I would say that that's how he functioned. All right, so backing up though, does the judgment on the bondservant extend to slaves from other lands? Let's go back to chapter 21. In verse 2, it says, Eved Ivri, a Hebrew bondservant. So it specifically says if you have a Hebrew who is, a bondservant, it's specifying that. Now, I'll go back to something I said earlier. These particular Mishpatim were given to Israel and not necessarily to the nations. However, Israel is to be a light to the nations. And how are they to be a light to the nations? By expressing these concepts and precepts that we see in the Torah, by living them, demonstrating them before people, to inspire them, I would say, to replicate that, to become part of that community even. So indirectly, I would say the answer to your question is yes. Although it specifically says Eved Ivri, a Hebrew servant or a Hebrew bondservant. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to say there. Directly, it's speaking to Israel, but indirectly through Israel, it can resonate out and influence the rest of the nations. Now, if your question is more of, when they would go to war and they would take these people to be their servants, does that apply? I guess we could debate that. But that would be my answer at this point. All right, Mr. Green?
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you so much for your message today. I had an observation and a brief testimony, if I may.
You may.
All right, so actually very similar to Brother Holste here. I was just maybe a different take on a different section. So I was looking at Exodus 21:9. So this is talking also about a father-daughter marital kind of, anyways. If he designates for her his son that is like a slave girl to be married to this guy's son, he shall deal with her as a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, clothing, or marital rights. And if he does not do these three things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. So I got to thinking about that. If we are using this as an analogy for us being the bride of Messiah, and how I got to thinking about how this relates to the Sermon on the Mount, where he's like, look, your Father in heaven knows you need food. Your Father in heaven knows you need clothing. And then the marital rights, I got to thinking about that too, how God being Yeshua being the faith, I'm not going to smack you, sorry. As I'm talking about good
Did he
husbands,
say he was going to smack you?
No, I said I'm not going to.
Is that what he said?
That's right. No, I was going to say, Celso and I were talking about this on the way in, about how God is so faithful to provide our basic needs. Beyond just food and clothing, he's willing and able to be more than abundant and close to us. We just have to be there to accept that. And unlike the possibility here of the husband not providing these, God doesn't write checks he doesn't intend to back up. So yeah, that was encouraging to me. And then I guess a really brief testimony. So I'll try to keep this brief. So I had to travel for work this week. I had to fly down to another state, pretty far away. And I don't know why God does this, but he woke me up at 1 a.m. saying, hey, there's going to be someone on your trip that you need to minister to, and you need to do it. And I was like, okay. Because that's what I said. And so I get up, it's pretty early. It was like 3 a.m. I got the flight. I'm looking around for people who need ministering, and there's no one. So I'm like, okay. So I go talk to the customer, a whole full day of meetings. I'm thinking this is going to be weird in a business setting, but that's okay. And nothing there. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I'm sorry, let me back up. This relates to your pressing through to how we don't want to miss out on the blessing by backing out too early. So I'll just scoot closer because this is distracting me now. But okay, so I'm looking for my mission, right?
You're trying to make up for smacking her a while
That's
ago is
right.
what you're doing. Yeah, that's right.
So that's the problem with talking with your hands. But anyways, so I'm looking for my mission, and I'm thinking, all right, I've gone through this whole day now. I've been awake for 20 hours. I don't know, what the deal was. Maybe I have a hero complex or what. But so I'm catching my next connecting flight, and I'm making small talk to this elderly lady next to me, as I do, making small talk. Anyways, and come to find out that she was on like an urgent trip from like clear across the country to meet her estranged husband in Knoxville, who was having emergency life-saving surgery that night. I was like, bingo. So I was able to talk with her and pray with her and things. And, that was, I guess my testimony is John of an earlier age would have been like, oh, I'll pray for you, and that would be it, and I'd walk away, or if I say that at all. And so that was just encouraging that, like, God said a thing, and I was able to saw it through, right? Even though I had been awake at that point for 22 hours and things, and I guess just to kind of tie it off as sort of confirmation that was a thing. On my way drive back home from the airport, I got a totally impromptu restorative call with somewhat estranged family member. And so I was just, praise God. God is good. He is so faithful and more abundant than we can even imagine. And so, yeah, stick to it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that testimony. So I haven't been up 22 hours, but I've been up a while today. And so I preface what I'm about to say with that fact. But I was just, when you said that, when the Lord spoke to you this morning, I've had those things too, but I'm sorry, I couldn't help but think, when Samuel was there in the tabernacle, and he said, Samuel, Samuel. He said, Hineni. When he calls out to John, John says, okay. I would love to see that recorded, you know. And when the Lord called out to John, John replied, okay. I'm messing with you, man. All right. Okay, all right. All righty. Where am I? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think I've been reading the Bible since I was a little kid, and I think I have some childhood trauma from reading the Bible because not understanding certain things. I know I'm embarrassed to ask these questions, but it's like I finally get to, at 57 years old, ask questions that I wanted to ask for so long. So this has to do with chapter 21, verse 20 and 21, and it says, "And if a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property." Now, if a man strikes another man and kills him, then it's the death penalty. But here we have a whole different set of rules for a slave. So whether I read it as a kid or whether I read it at 57, I can't quite process that in my mind with the loving God and understanding, you know, he loves all his creation equally, but at the same time, he seems to be making a person of lesser value, that if that person gets killed, well, the killer doesn't die. Are you following me?
I understand the question. I don't know that I have the definitive answer.
Oh, that's not helpful.
Well, you know.
I've been waiting all my life for this. Help me,
This is what you got
please.
here, you know.
I don't want any more
This
trauma.
is, yeah, right. No pressure whatsoever. But let's address it this way. And thank you, because you reminded me of what Fred said that Fred nor I could remember. And that is how you treat other people. Okay? So he tells them, you be careful about how you treat your servants, because remember, you were once servants in Egypt. And so I agree with what he was saying, is he's telling us through that, and he was telling them, don't be like the Egyptians were to you, to beat you, to strike you, and all these kinds of things. So of course, if they killed somebody, there was probably no consequence of that. But the overwhelming principle, it seems to me, is don't be like that. Don't mistreat people. Now, does it seem like he's letting them off here, you know, being able to beat somebody? Well, it seems to me that, well, we could focus on that. And it seems like there needs to be some kind of a consequence. But what he seems to be laying out here is, whether we think it's right, fair, just, what have you, that's another matter. But he's saying, if you put them in the bed and they're not working for you, you're stupid. Because, yeah, you did wrong, number one, mistreating them. But number two, now you're paying the price because they're not able to do the things that you rely upon them to do. And so there is a cost involved. It's just not the cost we would like to see exacted, right? Because we'd like to see somebody go beat the snot out of them, right? To put it very bluntly, okay? All I can say there is, like Brad used to say, God is smarter than we are. He understands these things a lot more deeper and you know, with a long-term vision than we can see. We would like to see swift and appropriate vengeance, you know. But he's saying there is a consequence here, you know, because you're going to be out. You know, it's going to cost you in your pocketbook. And let's face it, that's when most people take interest and sit up and take note. But again, to reconcile it with what Fred was saying, the Creator has already said more than once, don't mistreat your servants. Because you remember how you were treated. Don't do that to other people, you know. So I understand the question. As I said, I don't know if that's the definitive answer, but that's kind of what comes to my mind here. There is a consequence that they incur. There's a cost that they incur, just not the one we would like to see exacted. Right?
Yes.
All right. I get it.
It's a hard passage.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I laugh about it, but at the same time, it bothers my heart, because just reading it as a child and thinking that, you know, what if I'm that person that's of lesser value to God? I know that's.
I don't think it would be correct for us to say that he sees those people as lesser value. I don't, because if he had seen them as lesser value, then he would have not have already told them and told them multiple times, don't mistreat your servants, right? So I don't think we would be correct in viewing it. He sees them as being lesser. It's just that it seems to me, he's God, he can do what he wants. He is saying that the crime or the punishment needs to match the crime, right? And for all we know, a situation like that might put the master in the poorhouse. You know, we don't know. All right, so anyway. You may, sir. Pass that back to Mr. Lane real quick, please.
I think one of the things that taints our thoughts on this passage too is that culturally we look at slavery as people who are abducted from their homes illegally and sold for profit, you know, whereas these servants here were servants because there was a debt of some sort, and the person who the servant is serving redeemed them from that debt. So here you have someone who was redeemed from a debt, and they are doing something that has angered a kind person who redeemed them, you know, so much that they had to strike them to get them to resolve the situation. I won't try to read too much into it. So it's not that person is any less. It's that person is absolutely ungrateful to the person who redeemed them and refusing to do what they basically, their part in this redemption, which is only going to last for up to 6 years. Okay, so I'm not saying that it's right for someone to strike someone and kill them. Obviously that's wrong. And yes, Bill's exactly right. They're kicking themselves in the tail by beating someone so badly they can't do what they have been redeemed to do. Okay, and I think the New Testament or Yeshua's teaching on treat others as you would want them to treat you, because anybody in Israel at any time could find themselves through one bad decision in the hands of another person who has redeemed them. So this man one day is rich and has servants, next day could be a servant. And so the way he treats his servants is the way he will be treated if he ever finds himself in that situation. And I'm not sure if this is really perfectly addressing what you're talking about, but just realize these people have been redeemed, and they need to act like people who are redeemed. And the lesson for us, I think, is that we have been redeemed. And if we are refusing to serve our master, you know what I'm saying? Can you see where I'm going with that? Okay, anyway, so that was just a thought I wanted to tack onto that. I don't think that
Good
contradicts
thought.
what you're saying, John.
No, I think that kind of put the cherry on the top right there. Very good. And what's not written here is that servant's probably 15 and thinks he knows everything. But anyway, that's beside the point. No, I'm playing.
I had a thought on this, if that's all right.
Where are? Oh,
Right here.
John. Okay.
Okay, Hebrew slavery is not equal to Egyptian slavery. I mean, this seems to be a voluntary arrangement. You sell yourself. You've got something that you need to address. So what has happened here, in my opinion, is the Hebrew slave has voluntarily entered into an arrangement where his own rights and autonomy are diminished. He does this of his own free will. The house and the master are of preeminence. He serves them. His rights are less. It would naturally follow that he doesn't have the same value in that household if his rights are less.
As far as seniority or authority and all those
punishment,
kinds of things, yeah, okay.
This really follows with the Code of Hammurabi. Slaves were given a harsher punishment. There was no equity. Most of the Bible is equity. But in this case, this is something you do to yourself. You have divested yourself of some of those rights, if that makes sense.
In other words, we're 15. Okay. So. All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. All righty. Where are we going? Who's next? All right, Shelley, Bill, can you help me understand regarding the tzitzit? Are men commanded to wear them on the outside, not just for the person, but to those he comes in contact with? Elohim says to love him, to obey all. I've already answered that question 101 times. Shelley, no disrespect, but I've already addressed that. It's online. We have a little thing where we address all of that. So I appreciate your question, but I've already answered it several times. It's on YouTube, on Jacob's Tent, on YouTube. You can find it very easily. So, yes, ma'am.
I was going to comment on the topic before about the slaves and the treatment of the slaves, and maybe it doesn't have so much to do with Yah as it does with the people and the interaction between the people, the master and the slave, because in the marriage thing.
Can you hold that mic up just a little more? Thank you.
The marriage, Yah never meant people to be, but just one man and man and a woman. But because of the hardness of their heart, they were allowed to divorce and be written something to be. So, like the principle is don't, treat people badly like you were in Egypt. And, but there are wicked, evil people, masters. They weren't all, good just because they redeemed somebody. There were cruel people even in that group. So it has to do with writing out rules for them to follow because of the hardness of their hearts.
Okay. I think I said that in a different way.
Okay.
When I started out today. And just basically, God acknowledging that we are inclined to do our own thing, to do what's right in our eyes or what seems convenient at that particular time. He knows that, he acknowledges that, and so then he gives us these different judgments that are intended to influence how we respond in different situations, knowing that we are going to be faced with these situations. You mentioned the thing about, a bill of divorcement. That's not the way it was in the beginning, but this is what was allowed because of the hardness of your heart. So to me, this gets into permissible as opposed to perfect. Because ideally, it was one man, one woman, and it was supposed to be that way for life. But because of the hardness of the heart, Moses gave you a bill of divorcement. So again, to me, it's not God saying, I'm okay with these things. It's God saying, I acknowledge that these things are going to be. And so if this is going to be the way it is, then these are some guidelines that you need to work within as a holy people, as a holy nation. It's not in our Torah portion. It comes later in Devarim or Deuteronomy. But, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I can't quote it, line by line. But when they would go to war and they would vanquish their enemy, and the soldier would see a young woman that catches his fancy, he couldn't just immediately go and marry her. He had to give her time to mourn and acclimate and things like that. But at the same time, what I believe was happening was time is given for his passions to die down. And he may realize my motivation was not really, genuine, sincere, pure, all these things. It might have been, in the heat of the moment kind of a thing. And so God realizes that this, when soldiers go to war, everything's, all this kind of stuff. And they see this good looking woman, well, I'll just take her as, part of the spoils. Thank you. I was trying to avoid the B word. Anyway, but my point is that God acknowledges these things in us. That he acknowledges this fallen man has these inclinations that are not always good. And so he puts these roadblocks and he puts these boundaries in place that are to help us navigate those things. So I said that just to kind of put it in a little different way than you did, but I believe that's the issue. He addresses how our hearts can be hardened and calloused, whereas he's hoping that ideally our hearts will be tender and receptive to his instructions so that we don't get ourselves into a mess and get ourselves in trouble. And even place ourselves in a situation where we have to be, we kind of have to divest and have to put ourselves in a situation that we'd rather not be. Okay? All right, thank you. Right, in Exodus 21:6, it says that a slave's master should bring him before a judge. The Hebrew word used for judge is Elohim. Is there significance to this? Yeah. I mean, Elohim is translated in different places as judges and various other ways. But if we're going to read beyond the surface of the text, he's brought before Elohim, and it was either, I can't remember if it was Stephen or Fred or somebody who said he was brought before Elohim, that's like he's going before God, or maybe it was John. I don't remember. Was it you, John? Okay. So yeah, I do think there's a significance, because this is, the reality here is what the lesson in the laws of the bondservant. It's all about us who say we want to serve him, and he's saying, okay, do you really mean that? Because here's what my expectations are. Here's what my hopes are, is that you'll serve me because you love me, and that you will come to me and publicly announce that of your own free will and volition, you want to join my house forever and for always. So, yeah. Yes, that's the answer. Yes, there is significance to this. Where am I? Yes.
So I have a question about the relationship between the slave owner and the slave, going back to the question that she had before. What was the slave owner's responsibility? Because if we're relating it to the father, I see that it would already be the slave owner's responsibility to provide for his slave's recovery. Because wouldn't he provide food?
Okay, now are we talking about the question that she asked, or are we
Yes.
just talking about in general here?
No, back to the status of people and the slave and the slave owner.
All right.
So does the slave owner have to provide food and medical care to the slave?
Yes, that is my understanding.
Okay. So with a regular person, you have to pay for the lost work time and provide for the complete recovery. But if you do this to your slave, first of all, if he dies, the owner is punished.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if he hurts him, it's exactly what you said. It's foolish. Why would you do that? Because they are going to pay. So it really follows the same thing. I've also heard there's a different word for owner's property, that it might be translated, it's your silver, basically. It's your silver. It's your bucks, which is what you said.
What's that verse again? Okay, never mind.
21.
Kesef is the word for money. It can be silver, but it's money, currency.
Right. Not property, which would be like how people treated the African slaves, like property. They're not saying property. It's your money. It's your money that's going to go, you're losing it because they're not working. This is what you said. But to me, it's the exact same punishment. It's just pointing out, if you do it to your slave, you're losing money, and of course you're already going to have to care for them because they're under your care.
All right. So let's add on to that something else that was brought up. Now, I understand this is master-servant relationship, but let's consider the possibility that what was said, if you get into a situation with your brother and it comes to blows, you're kind of responsible to help nurse him back to health. So wouldn't that also apply in this particular situation if the master is already responsible for his protection, his provision, those kinds of things? And so now if he has, harmed him in some way, not only is he losing money, which seems to be a very unattractive way to look at it, but it is what it is, but it's also now incumbent upon him to do what he can to nurse this person back to health and to, get them back to where they need to be. So there's that part of it as well.
And then later when it talks about injuring the eye or whatever, then letting him go. So now, not only do you need to take care of himself, but now his debt's paid because you've harmed him enough. So again, it just encourages. So isn't that different than the Code of Hammurabi, where the slave actually does have rights?
You'll have to have Mr. Holstein answer that question. That is out of my purview. Do you have a response to that, John? You'll have to think about it? Okay. All right. I love it when John says he's going to have to think about it. So, all right. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Same topic.
Yay.
So when we look at adultery and we look at, you got to have 2 or 3 witnesses to establish a matter, like the woman and the man have got to be caught. And so for that to happen, it would have to be, and they're really reckless, it's rebellion or something of that nature. So if there isn't those witnesses, it's said that if you think your wife was unfaithful, you can take her and you can take the dust and you can take the writing, put it in the water and have her drink it. And, but it's recorded that this never happened. So no one has ever wanted to put their wife.
Okay, let me stop you. Where is that recorded?
Okay, yeah, maybe it's not recorded. It's often said in the Talmud that it's not recorded in the Talmud that it's happened.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to clarify that.
So I think maybe we see mercy in the Father in this, and it's like, well, it's never happened before. Am I going to be the first one to do it? You know, and it's like, well, you know, Yeshua says the weightier matters of the law, you know, and mercy is one of those. And so maybe when the Father said, if you hit your slave, that he dies, and even if you hit him and they die within 2 days, maybe by him saying that, it was that no one, unless it's recorded somewhere, it would have made everyone not to hit their slave hard enough to kill him. And so maybe it was a way for the Father to put mercy over that indentured servant and that master.
It's definitely established as a boundary. And we know how he feels about those. There's a lot of these things that are written that you would think that a holy nation would not have to hear, you know, but obviously they did. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe he is saying this is the consequence, these are the boundaries, things like that, you know. Hopefully encouraging them to stay far away from those, you know, the edge, so to speak. Now, we'll see. But I do want to say this. I actually do believe that my mind is going blank. I have not had enough coffee today. Do you mind? The ordeal of jealousy, thank you. I believe that it has happened, actually, and I believe it's recorded. It's when Moses comes down from the mountain, and he breaks the tablets, and he has the calf ground into powder, and he makes the people drink it. I believe it actually did happen. And even this part of it is not recorded, but how did the tribe of Levi know who was guilty to slay 3,000 people? Perhaps it's because their belly swelled after they had drank that. So I do believe it is recorded. It's just not like in your face, so to speak. So if it happened beyond that, I don't know. But I do believe it happened then. In fact, I believe that would have made, when Moses wrote these things down, there would have been people who read that, oh yeah, we know how this goes. Don't do that. That's...
Why I stand corrected?
Well, you know, I believe that is what happened there. You know. Anyway, did it happen other than that? I don't know. All righty. Okay, that's the same one we had. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Heather, you said you wanted to. I thought you just raised your hand there. You've had enough mic time. Well, people named Mike might take offense to that, you know, but. All righty. Well, Mr. Bailey.
In the, what we're talking about is killing your slave. Can that be tied also with the thought of if you have someone coming in to steal something, and it's because of in the heat of the moment, you killed your slave, not thinking, but in the heat of the moment, you kill the invader that was coming in to rob you. But if the sun comes up, then you cannot do that. So is that kind of like both of those are on the heat of the moment, that the Father realizes that us humans sometimes act foolishly?
Well, I had not, thank you. I had not thought about it that way. But I think there's merit to the notion that, you know, unless this person is just, you know, awful, you know, Simon Legree, you know, It's literature for all you young people. I think that there's some merit, that we could make that argument, that somebody does something that's just, they had a flashpoint, and they did something that maybe they even regret. Nevertheless, if someone's killed under certain conditions, there are consequences, and doesn't excuse it, so to speak. Something to think about. And all of this, again, it seems to me that God is acknowledging that we're fallen, and that we have this heart condition that has to be corrected. And so he's given us some of those boundaries and guidelines to live within, and acknowledging that you do have the potential for this. This is kind of off the main path we're on, I guess, but to me it's connected. And that is, the person who says, I would never do that, is setting themselves up to do that. The person who says, I would never think those things, I would never say those things, is setting themselves up to do that very thing. And so, and this might go back to what Josh was talking about. Maybe God says certain things, because I know you have the potential in you to do this, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now beforehand, here are the stipulations, here are the guidelines, here are the consequences. But maybe that would kind of, in people who had hearts to receive it, plant that seed of, not allowing those emotions to get out of control. I'll pick on me. When I'm stressed, it's really easy for me to spout off. And I know that none of you have that problem. I know that you have mastered that. But But when I'm stressed, I can spout off, and not think about it. And only after I've done it do I, why did I do that? And especially if I spout it off at her, because I'm really going to regret that, But here lately, the Father's really been dealing with me about, even when I'm stressed out, learning to control myself. And to keep my mouth shut or curb my tongue, however you want to look at it. Because I know that I do have that tendency. And not that you want it to be that way, not that anybody would want to, intentionally strike somebody, to the degree that's described here. But you're right. In the heat of the moment, things happen. Moses, in the heat of the moment, struck a rock twice, paid the consequence for that. So we all have that potential within us, and so we would be foolish to think we would never do that. We should really tell ourselves, yeah, I can see me doing that, therefore I need to be on guard against those things. So, thank you, sir. I'm coming to you in just a moment. All right, so concerning treatment of slaves, Yeshua said in Luke 12, verses 47 and 8, him who has been entrusted with much, even more will be demanded. Is there a part 2 to this? No? All right, well, thank you very much for the comment. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you prompted another question about trying not to spout off and regretting it. Is that because you are remorseful for having hurt someone, or because you are scared of getting into trouble?
Yes.
It's cute in our context with our relationship, but apply that to our relationship with the Father.
Well, because I know that when I do something rash and in an emotional response, that I do regret it, but I know that once things are done, there are possibly consequences of it. Apples and oranges, is it possible that Abraham regretted telling Pharaoh and the Egyptians that this is my sister and not saying that this is my wife? But his emotions allowed him, or provoked him, or whatever you want to word it, however you want to word it, provoked him to do those things. And then he saw that there were consequences. Now, he was spared a lot of things in terms of what could have happened to him, but God allowed him to have to deal with the consequences because there's a consequence called Hagar. And furthermore, there's Ishmael. And then there's all the pain and all the stuff that goes along with having to send Hagar and Ishmael away. But God said, this is what has to happen. So I dare say that there was remorse on his part, realizing, man, I shouldn't have done this or should have done it differently. And yeah, and when you do that, you know, there's probably going to be fallout from this. So it's both.
I agree, and I think it kind of goes back to what Josh had brought up. Maybe it's the uncomfortable position of the consequences that could follow that might prevent a person from doing that. But on the surface, I think that if we would think first about if we do lose control and we spout off, if we could view it as we're going to hurt the Father, that could keep us from having to go through a lot of those consequences and find ourselves in that place to start with. So anyway.
Well, I have a question for you. Am I in trouble?
No, but I do know where you live. No.
Pray.
I pray for you all the time. Okay. Anyway, so why I raised my hand initially is to get back to this topic that has been so interesting today. And this, we're still in Exodus 21, verse 20, about if a man shall strike his slave or maidservant with the rod, and he shall die under his hand, he shall be surely avenged. And then it's talked about if he will survive for a day or two, he shall not be avenged because he is his property. So just could it simply be a question of intent? You know, what was the intent of the person who picked up the rod? Was it, you know, to discipline, and he never intended to take it to the point where this person died or almost died? So if he died, then obviously the Father is saying there's a consequence, and it's immediate from what I'm reading. But that if he should live for a day or two, does that prove that the intent was not to kill him? Otherwise, if it was his property, he could have just gone and finished it off and said, well, he was disobedient and he deserved it. So maybe it's intent. The other part of that is, and I can't claim this as my own, it's from reading from the commentary. One suggests that a rod is meant for discipline. So if he picked up a rod, then he had the right to discipline because this is his property. Because as was brought up, you're in this situation because, you know, you either, you know, were avoiding poverty and sold yourself into slavery, or you were caught as a thief and you had to work to make recompense for what you took. So I just lost my point there. So yes, the master does have the right to discipline this person who is for this temporary time his property until the debt is paid, or until he can, you know, be redeemed out of poverty. So if he's using the rod, then as we read in the Word, the rod is for discipline. But as one commentator says, if you use something other than a rod, if he picked him up and struck him with a rock or something that you normally wouldn't use for discipline, then yeah, this guy was out of control and an eye for an eye. But if he did it the right way and with the rod as representative of discipline, and he died, maybe his intent was to kill him. But I struggle somewhat with what you were saying, Luba. Why is it that if he lived for a couple of days and didn't die, then the master was absolved? The guy still died. So my question was, would it be just intent? If he lived for a couple of days and then died, does that prove that the master did not ever intend to kill him?
So is that the main part
Yeah.
of your question? So what was the intent of the heart, in other words?
Right.
Well,
Maybe there's an allowance for the intent of the heart, is what I'm saying, because of the grace and the mercy of our Father. Not so much, you know, it doesn't seem so merciful to the person who actually dies, but, you know, to the master whose property this was for that time.
well, I mean, even our own, you know, law system distinguishes between those who, you know, in what was premeditated and what was done in the heat of the moment, and then they try to match the punishment with the crime. So we even see that in our system. So, you know, I would say that there could, you know, well, the Father knows the heart. He knows the intent of our heart. Mm-hmm. So I would say that, yeah, that probably factors into it. You know, so yeah, it's possible that in some of those situations, the master went to correct them. And being that that servant was 15 and thought they knew everything and said something smart, and he got, well, I'll show you. And then it ended up in this bad situation. I'm convinced that this guy was 15. So, what?
So we've heard.
Yeah, no, but to your point, yeah, I think that's probably certainly a possibility, that there's intent that is the underlying issue here, Nobody, few intend to inflict that kind of harm on somebody because, like you said, if he saw himself as the master and this guy's his property, he can do whatever he wants to, then he didn't have to take a rod. He could have took something else and just done it outright. So, of course, that would portray his heart as being evil.
Right, or he could have finished, the job, so to speak, as he's laying in the bed recovering. They're waiting to see if he's going to live or die. If the intent of his heart was, I need to be rid of this guy as his property, he could have just gone in and done it. So to me, it kind of speaks to the intent of the heart of the master.
Well, I think the way to your matter here is the instruction, don't do to your servants what Egypt inflicted on you. That's the way to your matter. That should be the overriding principle here. But if you're going to ignore that and you get into your situations, here's some of the ramifications of that.
Right.
All right? And you're sure I'm not in trouble?
Remember, you're too cute to be in trouble.
Okay. Hoskins said, you're in trouble. All right, where am I? Yes, ma'am.
I just have one comment to make about these verses. What Stephen Lane shared as he was sharing, I had an aha moment of, I am redeemed. I am that slave that has been brought into my father's house. And I'm 57, but I act like I'm 15 a lot of times. Right, Katrina? And so, and just what you had said, Beth, about that rod being used for discipline. Yeah, I don't really know what my point is, but it's one of those aha moments because it's more important, the function, than the form. So that's all I had to say.
If somebody cares to do this, there is a proverb in King James. I think it uses the phrase blueness of a wound. But if anybody could pull up that passage for me, I can't remember the address right now. Again, it's in Proverbs, and in King James it uses the blueness of a wound. If we can find that, I want to read that, because in some ways I think that speaks to the whole idea of discipline. And say it again?
2030.
2030, okay. So, sharp wounds cleanse away evil, so do stripes that remove the inward parts, is the way this particular version renders it. But read what you have, Beth. Or here, use the microphone. Oh, you got it? Okay.
Proverbs 20:30.
I think that's what I was told.
Yeah, 20:30. It says, blows that hurt cleanse away evil, as do stripes the inner depth of the heart.
All right, so here's King James. The blueness of a wound. I mean, what does that say to you when it talks about the blueness of a wound? It's a bruise, right? So the blueness of a wound cleanses away evil, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly. And so what is Solomon conveying to us? That discipline, correction hurts, and this is very politically incorrect and could get God in trouble in this society, but correction that actually leaves a bruise. I'm not suggesting anybody do that. I'm just telling you what it says in the scripture here. Stripes, so do stripes the inward part of the belly. And so Solomon's conveying to us that there is a correction that is needful in times to scour us of all those things that could drag our souls into hell, right? I mean, if it's better to lose your eye and go into the kingdom with one eye or one hand or what have you, than it is to be dragged into hell. I mean, what's a bruise? Again, to make sure everybody hears me on this, I'm not suggesting that you should spank your children in such a way that it leaves a bruise, okay? I'm just saying that there is a biblical principle that correction hurts. But that correction that hurts can have a valuable result if we're ready to receive that correction. Okay? So nobody run with that. Okay? I have to say that because, there are people who watch our live stream that don't like us. So they would take and twist words into something else. So did everybody hear me on that? Okay, very good. We'll talk after the cameras are off. Anyway, who's next? I'm just playing.
I just had a thought on what Jerry brought up about the thief.
Go ahead.
As I was reading it, got to go back to it. Just one second. If a thief is caught in the act of breaking in and is beaten to death, it is not murder, unless it happens after sunrise, in which case it is murder. The thief must rest. Okay, anyway. I was just thinking about how if a thief breaks in at night, and I didn't hear all of what Jerry said, but if a thief breaks in at night, you're defending your family, it's dark, you don't know what's going on, it's just a melee. But if there's light, AKA revelation, then you can see the thief. And if you can identify the thief, then you can just go accuse them. And there's laws that concern when a thief has someone else's property. But if you can't see the thief, you might be able to look at him and say, oh, he's just stealing a loaf of bread. He's hungry. And he's getting out the door and he's on his way and he didn't hurt me and I don't care if he takes my bread, that's fine. But it seemed to me that the decisions we make when we have no light, no knowledge, no revelation, have less of a consequence upon us than the decisions we make when we do have light, revelation, and knowledge. Anyway, that was the thought I had when I was hearing that. So,
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, servant or slave is his money and is kesef or silver in Hebrew, Exodus 21:21. Okay. Would this say that the servant is to be as treasure, as we are to be as treasure, peculiar people? Oh, okay, I guess we can make that argument. Yeah, they should be treated they should be treated with the understanding that they are treasure to the Creator. And so they shouldn't be mistreated, so I would say that. So, we could go with that line of thought, probably. Where am I? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm sorry, I just need one more clarification. On the rod, I don't think we're...
On the what? I'm sorry?
The rod... I'm back to the slave, and it's clarifying for me, so it's helpful. Thank you. But
on the rod.
The rod.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Sorry.
So now I'm with you. On the rod.
Going back to talking about the rod.
Okay, I got you. All right.
I'm thinking the rod is only for our kids. Am I misunderstanding the Hebrew slave? They're paying off a debt, whether they had a bad business deal or, lost their farm or whatever, or they stole something. Either way, it's not even really necessarily punishment. It's a way for them to get ahead again because they can't. They lost their farm. So they come under someone else, right? Because there would be punishment for a thief, but to pay off the debt that he can't do it, he could be a slave. So we wouldn't beat them. That wouldn't be how we treat So using the rod on them would be wrong. And I don't have the fancy apps, so but like rod seems to have the child, like training up a child in the way she go. We wouldn't train another adult.
Well, what did Moses carry?
So a staff.
A rod.
Yeah. Right, and so going with the shepherd, I mean, because they're going to whack the sheep to get them back, and they're going to hook the sheep. Okay.
Okay. Not just the little lambs either.
But don't we have everything we need all the tools we need to deal with human interaction, whether they're our slave or our, business partner or whatever, or just some other Hebrew, that we wouldn't beat them?
Again, I think the overriding principle is don't treat your servants the way you were treated in Egypt. Okay, so that should be the default position that everyone in this scenario would have taken. Don't mistreat people who are serving you, because you know what it was like. And he also says in other places, and I'll paraphrase, because I'm watching you. Mm-hmm. I'm watching how you do this. All right. But if your question is, are we wrong to think of them using the rod on adults? No, I don't think it's wrong to think that. I do have a fancy app here, okay? And Stephen's been talking to us, if you've been paying attention, about the words that are used for rod, and this one is Shabbat, okay? And here's something I found interesting about that. It could be rod, it could be staff, it could be a branch, it could be an offshoot. In South Georgia, that means a switch. You know what a switch is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you're familiar with that?
Not from personal experience.
Not from personal experience? No. Well, I speak from personal experience. So then obviously you don't know what the switch dance is, do you?
Well, I've seen it.
You've seen it?
Played out.
Does it look anything like this?
Yes.
Yeah. So rod in Scripture it can be a rod of correction. It can be a rod of instruction. It can be the rod of salvation. It denotes authority, responsibility, and calling, quite honestly. And so it can be utilized in different ways to bring about God's purpose and all. So no, I don't think it's, and if I understood you correctly, I don't think it's wrong to look at it as being a rod of correction, even when we're talking about adults. Now, again, the master to the servant interaction, I believe that the masters are held to a pretty high standard of responsibility in how they treat people. The Creator is acknowledging, like Jerry brought up, that sometimes things can happen in the heat of the moment. And maybe you didn't intend it to, like Beth was bringing out. Maybe that was not the intent of your heart. But if these standards are in place beforehand, maybe it goes ahead and implants the seed in your heart and mind that if you are in that master situation, you need to be very careful not to allow certain things to happen, to get out of hand, what have you. But that doesn't mean that you have to relinquish the rod that represents your authority, your responsibility in that particular situation. If I could, even though it doesn't use these kinds of terms here, but if I could, because he's our master, right? And we are his servants, correct? Has he ever corrected you? Has it ever hurt? All right? Thy rod and thy staff comfort me, right? Sometimes he comforts me by whacking me with the thing, right? Because we say all the time that we need to set boundaries for our children, because whether they acknowledge it or not, they appreciate those boundaries because they know that there's security there. They know that there are limitations, and they find comfort in that. So I think the same principle applies here. So, but what I was going to say is, he's the master, we're the servant. He's the shepherd, we're the sheep, right? And so we need to always remember that whatever role we are in, parent, pastor, what have you, we may have the rod of authority, but with that rod of authority goes a lot of responsibility in how we tend his sheep, whether they're your children, my children, whether it's a congregation. And so I'll just kind of, extrapolate that on out. I shouldn't use the rod of authority that's been given to me, nor should Beth, as the pastors of this congregation, to whack at people, and beat them. And, because that's something he's going to hold us responsible for. We're going to have to give an account of that. But at the same time, sometimes we have to use that rod of authority to correct and give guidance. And unfortunately, in some cases, not too often, discipline. So yeah, it's applicable to adults and not just children. And so I could expand this, I guess you could say, to address a lot of different scenarios that are real life, where we are every day. So anyway, I rambled on. Okay? All right? But it is comical to me to think that they used a switch. Anyway, going on. Mona, would this also apply to Yeshua being disciplined by the Father and he received the wounds for our punishment? I don't think he was disciplined by the Father in terms of he did something wrong and had to receive correction. So what? Yeah, he received upon himself what was due us. Right. So, okay, disciplined on our behalf. Got it. Yeah, okay. And he received all those wounds, by the way, that were meant for us. So, sorry, I misunderstood the question. All right, where am I? Or
right,
comment. Where am I?
Right here.
So.
Yeah,
Still out of breath from running around and hitting my toes, right?
I'll do it again, though.
Yeah.
I was reminded of something happened to me yesterday. Was it? Yeah, it was yesterday. Going to work. Oh, it's Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. Going to work. And that scripture kind of brought it to memory. So I'm going to work and running late. All of a sudden, I see some blueness behind me. And they're like, oh, gosh.
I'm just glad to know you're human.
Yeah. And I kept ignoring my still small voice that kept reminding me, watch your foot. And I do have an issue with that. It's just these boots are so big, they kind of...
do they have lead in the bottom?
Yes, they have lead. And they keep leading me the wrong way. No, but... I mean, yeah, I was guilty. And he pulled me over. And I was like, gosh. And the worst thing about it was that I've been told before. I've been warned. And my lovely bride, my still small voice, keeps reminding me, for my good. And, just, even though I got big ears, I guess it seeps out the other one, And so I felt horrible. I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm going to get what I deserve.
So you had remorse over this?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
And why did you have that remorse? Was it because you knew you had done something wrong or you were going to catch it?
Because I got caught.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, because I got caught.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it trickles down in the heart because I knew better. I should know better. And to make things worse, my little one, Janae, works with me. So she's with me, and she saw the whole thing, and that really made me feel even greater as a dad, But I deserve that blueness, But the wonderful thing of the Father is that I told the officer, he introduced himself. I showed him my license and everything, and he told me I was going speeding. I won't say the amount, but I was slightly too much. And I said, I apologize. I work, just up the road in Panel Belt. And he goes, where do you work at? I go, Panel Belt. Do you have proof of that? And I go, yes, sir. And I pulled out my forklift license and I gave it to him. He goes, oh, okay. You're good to go. Just be careful. Slow it down. I said, wow, God's mercy. I deserve judgment. And here's an officer who upholds the law. And yet he forgave me. And I thought, okay, if this doesn't teach me a lesson from here, and I am really, really going to get it next time. But that's the goodness of our God. I deserved a ticket, but he didn't give it to me. And I think all of us are in that situation, that we all deserve what, judgment, but he doesn't. In this situation about the slave, maybe the slave did deserve it. Maybe he was back talking. I don't know about Bill. I'm pretty sure you've been slapped into next week. That's happened to me before. And
not by her. That's true.
Nor my wife.
No.
But, I don't know why I get these stories of Nathan, but Nathan, when he's a little boy, I didn't like to spank him, but I used the rod on him, and he went crying to Isabel, and she goes, I thought I was going to die. But I said, I didn't hit him that hard.
But it was his heart.
It was his heart, So correction, we need it, but he is merciful.
I agree with all of that. But you didn't get a ticket. Wow. They start writing the ticket before they get out of the car with me. I have never been pulled over where I didn't get a ticket. She, on the other hand, she'll get pulled over because she has been known to be leadfoot too. And she'll just say, yes, officer. Okay, go on, just slow down. It is. Well, the one time you got a ticket and you went to court and you talked to the judge and got it dismissed. You were innocent.
Her dad was a lawyer.
Do what? Yeah, anyway. My point is not that you get out of them. The point is I don't get out of them. So anyway, good for you. Yeah. Yes, well, I was guilty. I was just like him. I was guilty. And they wrote me a ticket anyway. It didn't help that every cop in town knew my dad. So, you Clouds boy? Yes, sir. All right. Yeah, let me write the ticket. Your dad's going to kill you. Had this. I should not tell this story. Don't do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Okay. All right. So this is before I met Beth. Never met Beth before. Okay. Just want to make sure this is clear. So I'm out with this young lady. We're riding around, and we're doing teenager things and riding around, and so cop pulls me over, and I get out of the car, and he looks at my license and says, "You Bill Clouds boy?" I said, "Yes, sir." "You been doing so and so?" "No, sir." "Don't you lie to me, boy." "Yes, sir." "Boy, you get home. If I see you out tonight, I'm taking you to jail. You know what your dad's going to do about that, right?" I'm like, "I'm out of here." Get in the car. She said, "Where are we going now?" I said, "You're going home." "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going home." I was more worried about what somebody else would do, not the cops. Anyway, well, I'm glad. Good for you. Good for you. Didn't get a ticket. No, I'm not jealous at all. Not bitter, I'm over it, I'm beyond all. No, I'm playing. All right, I'm cutting up. All right, where are we?
Bill.
Yes,
Sean.
yes.
Okay, so the first 3 times I got pulled over in Tennessee, I got tickets.
Look where we've gone with this conversation now. Okay, good.
The last 2 times I've gotten grace.
Good for you, Sean.
But that's not my comment. My comment was, as far as I think in the context of spanking our children with a rod or switch or however we choose to do it, I think it's a little different than the slave owner in this scenario. I think there may have been something severe for him to go to that discipline. And I think everyone's recollection of the scripture is correct. Like just even the robber, dying in that time, like Stephen said, if the sun rises, I think Jerry even said it too, but if the sun rises, there's been time for that crime to pass. But I think when it comes to the servant being beaten, I think that scenario would be something more severe. I don't think it would be just, he just mouthed off. I think it was something, he may have been trying to stop a fight or something like that. So that would be my take on it.
Whatever the scenario is or was, it's going to come back to what Beth pointed out, the intention of the heart, but also God acknowledging the condition of our heart and that we're fallen, we're inclined to evil. There has to be these checks, there has to be these boundaries, and he places those there and lets us know in advance, if you cross this line, here are all the consequences. So the message is what? Don't go there. Don't do that. Don't try to see how close to the line you can get without getting burned.
If we want mercy, we must show mercy.
Yeah, that's true. If we expect to reap mercy, we have to sow mercy. Again, what did he say? Don't do as the Egyptians did to you. Look what happened to them. I'm watching. You be considerate of those that serve you. All right. So, if you want mercy from me, you sow mercy. The parable about the man who the king released him from his financial obligations. And then what did he go out and do? He went and found somebody who owed him less than what he'd owed the king, and he demanded payment and then had him tossed into prison. Well, you see what the consequence of that was. So yeah, if you want mercy, you sow mercy. If you want forgiveness, you sow forgiveness. If you want God to be long-suffering with you, then you need to be long-suffering with others. Right?
Amen.
All right. Let's see. All right. Musical Mannequin asks, I have a question for you, Musical Mannequin, later. I know this is talking about servants from biblical times, but how would this be in modern times? Should I be concerned about my McDonald's manager? Like, be prepared for the unexpected. I'm not sure what you mean by unexpected. And, just for everybody to know, there's an LOL at the end of this, so it even made them chuckle. So, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not really sure exactly what you're meaning by that. Should you be concerned about your McDonald's manager? If you're already questioning whether you should be concerned about their McDonald's manager, should you be concerned about getting beat by your McDonald's manager? If you're concerned about it, you might want to change jobs. Now they tell me, joking. Okay, all right. Anyway, where am I? Okay. All right. Is that Mr. Zellner under that cap?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Very good. All right, sir.
It's a hamburglar. All right.
People at home are thinking, what did they have for lunch today?
Drive slow on 411. All right.
You speak from experience, John?
Several times over. Yes, sir.
Polk County, huh?
Of the 3 or 4.
Oh, okay.
All right, so very interesting Torah portion, and one of the things that really grabbed me was the animals and the animals aspect in that, and animals hurting other animals or people. And so it reminded me of a couple of other passages. One in Genesis about where man has dominion over the animals. And then in Isaiah 1:3 where it says that the ox knows its master. And so the word for know, of course, is yada, which denotes a more intimate relationship there. And so for me, as I'm reading this about the animals and the animals going into another territory, crossing the boundary, hurting a person or another animal, specifically the ox, as I see that's mentioned a little bit more prominently, I'm thinking of that's an aspect of the person that they're not able to control per se. It's a character of them that has somehow that they don't have an intimate knowledge of in a sense. And they don't know, like for an ox, may represent strength. It's a very serviceable animal, one of the higher animals for the Israelites at the time. And so I'm thinking that in human terms, like, do I even know my own strength? Do I venture into other people's strengths and somehow damage that instead of allowing the Father to operate in his strength within me?
So observation or question?
Just an observation
Okay.
that the Father just placed upon me, and it's just something that I felt like just, I guess as I read Scripture more and more, I try to relate these, even animals, the slaves, somehow as a character or aspect of myself that I have to deal with, or somebody around me has to deal with as well.
So if I am hearing you correctly, what you're saying is not only do we need to be aware of our weaknesses, we also need to be aware of our strengths.
Very much so.
And
Yes,
don't
sir.
overplay those, and don't encroach, don't allow our strengths to encroach on someone else's boundary, because we don't want, in our weakness, to allow them to encroach on our boundary. Would that
Yes,
be a
sir.
summary of what
Yes,
you're
sir.
kind of getting at here?
Correct, yes, sir. And like I think the example that's used in Scripture is goring. So the ox has horns, and the horns are used for defense, protection. And I'm also thinking along the lines that horns are also symbolic of salvation, that horns are a life-saving aspect. We see where a couple of guys go to the altar and grab the horns on the altar. So being very careful and cognizant of our salvation per se, I think could be a part of that as well.
Okay. I can definitely see the former, in regard to not only recognizing our weaknesses, but also recognizing our strengths and not misappropriating those things.
Correct.
Some people are strong personalities, and if we let them, that strength, they can encroach on, territory they should not be. I can see that. Very good.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain more on the rod and staff, how they comfort us? I never quite understand that. Thanks. God bless y'all. I don't know that I can expound on it any more than what I said earlier. I might get my wife to chime in on this. We're convinced that in spite of the fact that children will, buck every rule and every boundary we place there, that in their heart of hearts, they appreciate those boundaries. I've even heard some people argue they want those boundaries. In fact, that there's the argument that some children act out in rebellion because there are no boundaries. So if our great shepherd uses his rod and staff to comfort us, not only does that mean he leads us beside still waters and leads us into green pastures, but he also at times will use that as a goad to pop us in the rump to get us to walk in the right place, because if we go our own way, we may be in danger. So the fact that he is willing to correct and discipline as well as to lovingly and gently lead us to where he wants us to be should be a comfort to us. It should be a comfort to us to know that he loves us enough that he will get in our grill when need be. And the experience when correction and discipline is needed, the experience is not fun. It's not fun. It's painful. It stings. But then afterwards, if we have any, any sense at all of what's right and what's in our best interest, we'll come to realize that God loves us enough to discipline and to correct, and that should be a comfort. The alternative being that he doesn't care about us and he just lets us go headlong into destruction. So, which the latter is not what he's going to do. So that's how I see it anyway. Do you want to add anything to that? The mic's behind you.
Well, it's definitely true, and we witnessed in our own household with our children having 4 and the first 3 being boys. You can imagine anything and everything got challenged. From the physical things in the house to the non-physical boundaries of discipline and what's expected. And one of our boys was perpetually testing the boundaries. And there would be times that if Bill and I were busy, involved, something was going on with one of the other children, that this one would purposefully act out as if to say, do you still love me? And, what part of that is personality of the child, but the other is just that the boundaries do bring comfort. They bring security. And you said it, he disciplines those he loves. So to me, that's the comfort enough right there. And not that I love discipline, how it feels, I should say. I love the end result, but getting there is never comfortable. And I can remember as a child, doing what children do and getting into something that I knew I shouldn't have. And, especially if we had a babysitter and mom, I can remember one time in particular, we were told not to play with this particular toy while mom and dad were gone because they knew it was messy and unsupervised could be unsafe. Well, of course, we did it anyway. And when they got back, it was just a matter of time before they found out what we had done. And you're kind of waiting for the bomb to drop. You're going to get in trouble. And so sometimes they would take care of it right away, and sometimes they would let it linger a few days to see what we were going to do with it. And I think what was worse is letting it linger a few days because you knew you'd done something wrong and you just wanted to go ahead and get it over with, to get past that, to receive the discipline and get to the other side of it, because that's where you knew you were safe. Because as long as it was unaddressed, you were kind of out here floating around in what's going to happen, which way is this going to go land. But once it was addressed and you were back where you belonged, within the boundaries that were set for you, then you knew you were safe. Boundaries, we've been really hitting on that a lot lately. And boundaries are necessary, and I think that we are in a time where God is calling us as a people to define or redefine those boundaries and to uphold those boundaries, to strengthen them where they have been allowed to become weak. And that's important. But once the boundaries are established, then the real test comes with what do you do inside those boundaries. Boundaries are good to let you know this is where you can be safe and it keeps others out. But what we do inside the boundaries is where our character is truly shown. Do we have a good attitude and say, I'm thankful that you put me in these boundaries and that I've received the discipline? Or do we have a bad attitude and say, well, how come they get away with it and I get in trouble and they've done the same thing I did? So we would tell our kids growing up, God's not going to let you get away with some things that other people do because of the plan that he has for you. He's going to watch you. Not that he doesn't care about other people, but he has this plan for you that's not going to let you get away with this thing. For them, it may be something else they're not going to get away with, but he's always watching. And then there is a distinct difference between discipline and punishment. Discipline is because you love someone, and it's to, as you said, to correct, to guide back into the proper boundaries, and then to protect once they're there. Punishment is, I'm going to get even with you. Punishment is, I'm going to make you hurt because somebody hurt me. Or I'm going to abuse my authority and do this because I can. It's out of balance. And I don't see anywhere in the Word where the Father says he punishes his children that way. He disciplines, and that's all throughout the Word. I think punishment is something that happens when we're not his children. But we invite that on ourselves. He doesn't do it to us. So if we carry bruises, a lot of times they're the ones we've given to ourselves because of our lack of following his boundaries and coming in line with his discipline.
Well, as far as the word punishment and discipline, I understand what you're saying. I would just think it would be fair to say he does not exact retribution on his children.
Yes, that would
Right.
definitely be a better way to say it. Yeah.
All right, so he is always about restoring us. Right. I'm probably going to step into something here that I may regret, and it'll become obvious in a moment. What's the name of the woman? She was autistic, but she worked with cattle.
Temple Grandin.
Temple Grandin?
Grandin. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the end result is completely different and opposite than what we're talking about. But we're working with cattle with it, when they would take them to slaughter, they were all, excited, there's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety and all these kinds of things. And she designed this system where these cattle would be led into very, very confined quarters that you could say it was kind of a straight path. It was a narrow path anyway, but those boundaries calmed them. Now, again, the end result is completely opposite of what we're talking about. God is not leading us to slaughter.
No.
He's leading us to life.
That's true. Our flesh.
Okay? Yeah, our flesh. That's true. Death to flesh. But he's leading us to life. But the whole idea, and this is the point, those boundaries that confine, that might seem restrictive, were actually had a calming effect. And so that goes back to the idea, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. It is a calming effect, even though we don't like the experience of being corrected and being disciplined, that nonetheless, there's a calming effect if we allow it, because we know that our Father loves us. So
that works even with humans. One of our older boys worked with CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And one of the families that he worked with had 2 autistic sons, and one was prone to a certain type of behavior where he was just uncontrollable. And the best way, and our son knows this from experience, to help this child was to do what they call the basket hold, where he wasn't being injured, he wasn't being restrained in any way that would hurt him, but he was restrained by our son, who was the older, stronger person, in a way that he could not move, he couldn't hurt himself or anybody else. And that's what calmed him down. That's what brought him back to, he would breathe normally, he would stop the raging, and they could start getting through to him again. And so it's that squeezing. And if you watch the movie about Temple Grandin and read the book, I highly recommend it. She built the machine for herself that when she was feeling out of control and stress and the outside forces were just too much for her, she would go and put herself in this machine that later became what they used for the cattle to calm herself, because that squeezing for her was what gave her comfort and helped her kind of reset. I think discipline is going into that place of squeezing. Discipline is finding out what's inside of us sometimes, and maybe having to stay in that place of squeezing a little bit longer until we can get some things figured out.
thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. We took a few minutes to answer your question or respond to it. Thank you. Proverbs 23, verses 21 through 23. Don't spoil your servant when he is young. If you do, he will bring you grief later on. Is this referring to our children also? Yeah. I think in most cases, allowing them to do, or spoiling them, however you want to put it, to do whatever they want to is not helpful. It is not in their best interests, because if they learn at an early age, there are no boundaries. When they get older, there will be no boundaries. If there's no respect for authority when they were young, they very likely will not have respect for authority when they are older, and things just progressively get worse from there. So absolutely, children, well, we all need boundaries, but as parents and grandparents, it is actually, I believe, going back to that thing about having the rod of authority, there's responsibility with that. And part of that responsibility is to make sure that our children do realize there are boundaries. We can't make them do the right thing. We told our kids this all the time. Can't make you do the right thing, but we can show you there are consequences for doing the wrong thing. So maybe you'll learn to do the right thing. All right, where am I? Yes, ma'am.
I want to qualify this. I have had no personal experience so far, and I'm not going to say it won't ever happen, but I have not had a ticket in Tennessee so far. But coming from other states, and 3 other states through, I'm going to say I have noticed that Tennessee is very vigilant about their ticketing people. I mean,
It's because we believe in boundaries.
yeah. Anyway, so much for that. Enough said for that. I was wondering if other people, I haven't thought this for very long, but the thought came to me about when Yeshua said, when you have clothed somebody, when you've given them a drink, when you visit them in prison, you've done it to me. Because they said, well, when did we do it to you? We never did it to you. But he said, yes, you did. When you did it to other people, you did it to me. Now, my thought was, isn't that the same way when you spout off to other people? Aren't you doing it, saying it to God? Aren't you saying it because you are going your own way, doing your own will? It's against God. You might be saying it to them, but you are saying it to God. You are doing it to God. It's the same difference. There's the blessings and the cursings. I'm not... I'm just saying it to because I'm trying to use that to curb my anger sometimes, to not say things, to keep my mouth shut and to be quiet.
I get it.
So that I'm not it's like I'm saying it to God. I'm not saying it to them, you know?
Yeah, I get it. That's why I said what I did earlier. You know, didn't you have something? Didn't you want to say something? Let's pass the mic over here, David. Yeah, because, I mean, when we do things out of emotion, you know, we're stressed or whatever the emotion is, you know, and things just pop out there. You know, if we have a conscience, as soon as we say it, we realize I've messed up, you know. And not just because you maybe hurt someone else or made them feel comfortable, you know, because, you know, whatever you impose upon them, as you just said, you know, in some ways, it's probably an indirect, you know, slur at God. You know, I've joked a lot, and yet I'm very serious. You know, I have conversations with God out in the woods. They're outside, you know. And one of the reasons that I've done that is because I don't want other people to hear what I have to say or the tone of my voice or, you know, sense the anger or whatever it is. And, you know, because I don't want to draw other people into my drama, you know, if I can help it. Is that right or is it wrong? I don't know. It just is. But to your point, maybe it would be better for us to hold our tongue when we are in front of others, around others, so that we don't do that to them and indirectly do it to God. You know, I think I want to believe that God would much rather me go to him directly and share my heart with him. I think he can handle that, right? Rather than me inflicting harm and hurt or whatever on one of his sheep, right? So I definitely get it. I was kind of cutting up, but you know, you were meddling, okay? All right. I'll come to you in just one second. Is not David referring to the rod and staff as guiding us, not hitting us? Yeah, I believe that overall that's what he's referring to, that God uses his rod and staff to guide us. But I also believe, as I understand, the shepherd's rod is sometimes used for correction. And sometimes that means it's a goad, you know, to, hey, get moving in the right direction. And sometimes he can punch them in the rump to kind of let them know, I mean business. So hitting, okay, and, you know, that word in our culture, especially today, has this negative connotation that, you know, it's something that's out of control, it's abusive, et cetera, et cetera. I never would insinuate that God is abusive in any way. We know he doesn't do that. But he does chasten those he loves. And sometimes his chastening stings, and it's very uncomfortable. And so I think he uses his rod and staff for both. Not hitting, not being abusive, but when he has to bring discipline and correction and let us know, hey, I mean business. I'm really serious about this. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so on the lines of chastening, so in Proverbs, it talks about, his mercy and truth purges iniquity. And by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. So in Hebrews 12, it says, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. And what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then ye are bastards and not sons. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of the spirits and live? For they verily for a few days chasten us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. And then this is the part that I want to get to. Now no chastising for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruits of righteousness unto them that are exercised thereby. And I was thinking about what you were saying about being planted. That fruit, something's got to be planted and, say holiness, and by his mercy and by his truth for that peaceable fruit to start coming forth. So yeah, it's not going to be joyous, but if it's going to bear fruit afterwards, then I'd rather be chastised where I can bear the fruit of his righteousness.
And just to go back and re-emphasize something you read, to not receive his chastening makes us illegitimate. And none of us want to be considered illegitimate, right? So to be sons and daughters, we're basically saying we're ready to receive your chastening and your correction when it's needed. Where am I? Yes.
So I had a question, and as I thought about it and as people talked, I feel like I kind of got the answer, but I still, correction or comment. In Hebrews, someone mentioned about Yeshua when we were talking about the rod of discipline and him bearing our punishment. And Hebrews 5 says that that though he was a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered. And that didn't, I had trouble reconciling that because my first thought was, well, he was the Son of God. Of course, he didn't give in to the temptations and, the testing. And then up at the end of 4, though, it says that we don't have a high priest, unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but he was tried in all respects as we are without sin. So I guess I felt like that came as my answer a little bit later, but any thoughts or other comments?
Well, I think that Messiah suffered, the ultimate suffering, of course, was on the tree, but he suffered a lot before that. There was a lifetime of suffering so that he could be acquainted with all the things that you and I were going to have to be acquainted with. So how can he relate to me if he can't relate to my struggles?
That was kind of the piece of that was he learned obedience through what he suffered. I kind of felt like he didn't have to learn obedience. He was the Word.
And yet he became flesh and dwelt among us, right? So he took on the form of lowly man to be able to identify with the things that we have to struggle with. But as the writer of Hebrews says, yet without sin, Yeah, he's the Word of God. He's the Word made flesh, and he knew these things. And yet, and I can't explain this mystery because that's what it is to me. Yet it's very clear in what we read in the Scripture that he acquainted himself with everything that you and I have to deal with, overcame it. Later on, he says, "Now I've overcome the world, so that you can overcome the world." So in him, we can overcome all these things because he's already kind of, pioneered the path for us to do that. But anyway, the point is that how can he relate to me as a human unless he can relate to everything that we had to deal with as human? And so that is why how do I want to say this? All right, pause, sidebar. I've heard people say that when he went into Gethsemane to pray, that he was not afraid of going to the tree to die. Okay? That was not an issue for him. That his biggest issue was the whole idea of the separation from the Father and those kinds of things. And I won't dispute that, perhaps that idea of a temporary separation, if that's possible, maybe that was on his mind. But I don't agree with the idea that when he went into the garden to pray, that he was just completely, uncaring and indifferent to the whole thing that was about to happen. And here's why. Because if he was indifferent about it, how can he relate to me? Because you and I, if we had to face that, what would we be doing? We'd be crying out to God.
The verse before that it says that I've never actually read it. I've read it, but I didn't see it until now. It says that when he had offered up prayers and petitions with strong crying and tears to him, who was able to save him from death.
Right.
Yeah.
If it were possible, Father, let this cup pass from me. Why does he pray that prayer if there's not a part of him that is wanting this cup to pass from him? Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. So if he had had his will, what would have happened? That cup would have passed from him. My point is, in that he relates to me and how I would have, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. If I were in that situation, how I would have been freaking out about what I knew was about to happen. And so this is definitely on his mind. And so he comes to terms with and comes face to face with the very thing that you and I would be faced with if we were going into that kind of a situation. So he can relate to us as people. Yet, what does he pray? Not my will, but your will be done. He does it, I don't want to say this the wrong way, and I don't want to say it irreverently, but he was concerned about it, it seems to me. But he went ahead with the Father's will anyway. And that makes me esteem him even more. Much more than if he was indifferent to it and I just got to walk through the motions. That would be very difficult for me to relate to. But I can relate to him saying, if it were possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, my will, not my will, but your will be done. That makes me esteem him more. That makes me appreciate him more. But it also teaches me to be a son and a daughter of God, that we have to be willing to accept whatever the Father's will is and to resign ourselves that not my will, but your will be done. And he's already shown us that in him we can do this. He overcame the world, and in him we can overcome the world. Because the Spirit of God is going to be there. He's going to put words in our mouth. You don't even think about what you're going to have to say. The Spirit of God will give you the words to say. Don't think about what you're going to do. The Spirit of God will lead you through all these things. And to me, that's a comfort to know that when it comes that time, whenever it is, in your life, my life, our life, whenever that time comes, if I am keeping my eyes set where they need to be and my heart is where it needs to be, that I don't have to fear, because I know that the Spirit of God, the Word of God, that he's going to be there with me to lead me through all of that, in spite of my concerns, my fears, my whatever you want to call it. All right, I rambled on, but I embrace the idea that even though he is the Son of the living God, that he is well acquainted with what you and I have to deal with and all the things that we have to, the gamut of emotions and all these things. He's acquainted with them. He doesn't give in to them like we do, but he's not so far removed that he can't have compassion and mercy for what we deal with as fallen creatures. Anyway. All right, one or two more. Mr. Green?
Yep. So we've talked a lot about the Exodus 20 through 21. So if you have a slave, you beat him, he dies. We don't need to repeat all that.
Yeah.
I think that relates I think that relates to Yeshua, though, and the resurrection. I'm honing in on the 1 or 2 day thing. So Yeshua,
okay.
Yeshua took our beating for us. He died. So that means there has to be some sort of avenge of the death of the person who took the beating. But he survived more than 1 or 2 days. And I guess doesn't need to be avenged anymore. The implication being, even if, so the implication is that not only did he take our punishment, but God won't hold even that act against us.
These are deep thoughts. I'm still going down into the depths to kind of piece all this together. I understand where you're going. I'm just kind of pondering, trying to put it together in my brain.
Because it's easy to think like, God would be like, well, dummy, I made a way for you. But God in his abundant goodness and generosity doesn't even, at least it would appear to me, doesn't even approach it that way.
As far as holding people accountable, is that what you mean?
No, we're still accountable, but sometimes when you buy dinner for somebody, it's like, well, you kind of expect them to buy dinner back for you at some point. But God doesn't view it that way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Even though God paid the way for us, we don't owe him anything.
Agreed. Except a will to serve him.
Yeah.
And not as repayment, because we can't repay, but as a demonstration that we love him, which is all he's ever wanted, right? Okay. So, yeah, I can't afford to buy dinner where he serves,
There's no way.
There's no way. Right. All right. We're still waiting on everybody. Okay. All right. Oh, we do? Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am.
What a wonderful Midrash. What a wonderful day in the Lord's house this has been. Boy, a lot of thoughts. One was the being planted thing and the discipline, and we prune our trees to bring forth fruit. That's a discipline. And I loved what Beth was saying because I kept thinking about being swaddled. This thought just feels good to me. But that's a boundary. I mean, a baby can't flail around if it's being swaddled, and that's something we do to our babies for the purpose of making them safe or comfortable or whatever. And I guess as we grow, we have to get a little spat once in a while, from the flailing. This has been a wonderful, wonderful thing to me. Now, I'll finish with something you'll particularly like, and maybe not. When okay, probably not. Okay. When my little cat was young, I decided, here we go, right? I thought I wanted to teach her to leash, to walk on a leash. And so I read all about it.
Hold on. They make leashes for cats?
No, it's just a leash,
For a cat?
It's a leash. Yeah, you could put a dog on the end of it. They don't care.
Yeah, dogs don't care. That's the point.
Put a little thing on them, a little jacket-looking thing.
Yeah, dogs don't care.
No, they don't.
Somehow I can imagine that cats do.
She wasn't impressed.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And you know why, right? Yeah. Because they're the Antichrist.
Yeah, the Antichrist.
Right.
I know.
Right.
I got a picture of it. Remember that picture?
Okay.
Anyway, when I was reading about how to go about this, they said to walk them up and down in front of a hedge or a wall or something. That's where you would train them, because that gives them a sense of security, because they're not liking this leash thing, and they're going to pull against it and carry on, But I thought that was interesting. So I'm walking her up and down. At work, we had a wall, and in the parking lot, and I'm walking her up and down, and she gets to where she's doing okay, So I thought, okay, well, let's go across the parking lot to the car. She squatted right down. We got out in the middle of the parking lot. She just hunkered down, wasn't going to move a muscle. You know, and I just thought it was interesting. And I thought about life, you know, and how those boundaries are so important. And I will tell you something else. I appreciate the way that this ministry is conducted because there are boundaries here. And I appreciate that. It's good. It's a good thing. So there's my pansy thing for today.
That's the name of your cat, right?
Pardon?
Pansy, that's the name of your cat?
Pansy's my cat.
That's appropriate.
Yeah. But she's not afraid of anything.
I know, because she's the Antichrist. The Bible says that the adversary goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. A lion is not a dog. The lion is a cat, right? I rest my case.
She's a sweetheart. I'll rest my case.
Okay, all right. And by the way, you know the name of the dog on the RCA Victor album? Do you remember his name? Nipper. I thought about that in the middle of Oneg. Nipper. Okay. All righty. One last comment, question, observation real quick before we pray, because see all our young people are coming in. And so, does she want to say something? Okay. What do you want to say, honey? Yeah, this way. There you go. What do you want to share with us? Come over here where I can see your face. Walk over to Dad so I can see your face.
I want to pray.
You want to pray? Okay, I tell you what, darling. As soon as everybody gets in here, I'm going to let you pray, okay? Can you wait just a moment? All right. All right, we'll just hang out with Dad for just a moment. Beth, is there anything we need to announce? Use the microphone.
I'm going to borrow it, baby. I'll give it right back to you, okay? Okay, if you have not registered for the Passover Seder, we are getting close to being full, so you need to go ahead and do that. You should have the information, and if you're not sure how to do that, you can call the office or email info@jacobstent.org. We do still have some room, but we're getting close to where it's going to be harder and harder to get you at the tables with your group if you're a large group. So do go ahead and get that in right away. But before Passover and the Seder and everything, we do have Purim coming up. Now, Purim is no charge, but we do need you to register so we'll know how many chairs we need to have available for you. So if you'll do that, and Nathaniel had last Wednesday, which was not a snow day, you know, one prior to the one that just passed. He had a very good announcement about that. So I don't know where he is now. He might not be here, so or I would have him give that announcement again. Okay, he's in the back working. So anyway, do come and be a part of that wonderful night. It's going to involve some finger foods afterwards for you to bring. So go and find your email about that. And if you're not certain, you can also email the office about that too. But we need you to register. And then if you signed up for the newcomers meeting, please remember that that is this Monday night here at 6:30. We don't have a babysitter available, so it will be just for the adults in your family. And I think, did I leave anything out?
I have just one quick comment to make when you're done.
Okay.
Are you done?
I'm done.
Okay. Do be praying. This week we finalized some things in terms of moving forward. Waiting on one little piece of information to come back, which we expect will come back favorably. And at that point, we'll be, kind of making one of the last of the initial steps as we move forward. And then next month and going forward, you'll be hearing from us about things that we're going to be doing to get ready to make the move. We're not going to try to move in right away because there's several things that we want to do. To make it more, what's the word I'm looking for here? To fit our personality a little bit. We want to, when we do things, we only want to have to do them once. And so we felt like instead of trying to do that and move in and moving out of here at the same time, we would just do the things that we need to do over there before we actually make the move. So we'll keep you updated. I know that's rather vague, but we'll keep you updated. But this week we'll be finalizing a few things, and then we'll begin the process of relocating. So this next Shabbat, we will be here. Don't show up over there, okay? We're not quite ready to do that just yet. So we'll let you know in plenty of time when you need to show up at the other place. All right, yes? Oh, okay. Beth is saying that once we pray and dismiss, there'll be some slides up here on the screen, so pay attention to that because they have some important scan for more information. QR codes. Okay, the hocus pocus things that are up there, right? No witchcraft, right? Hocus pocus is, my way to describe things that I don't understand, okay? Things like planning center and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, all right, are all hearts and minds clear? All right, young Miss Graham, you have the microphone. Dad, will you bring her down here? And you're going to pray for us as we dismiss? Yeah, come on up here. There you go. All righty, you ready? Okay, is the microphone on? Uh-huh. It is? Very good. Let's pray.
Dear Lord, faithful food and water, faithful all of you done, please protect Israel and let the dogs see what they're doing is wrong. And faithful all you done, faithful roof overhead. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, pray for one another, strengthen one another, encourage one another, be safe going home.